Dear viewers, thank you for joining us. We are continuing this rolling coverage in the wake of Iran's response to the assassination of Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani. And for those just joining us, earlier today, the Islamic Republic of Iran fired dozens of surface-to-surface missiles against US military bases in Iraq, where General Soleimani was assassinated. We'll be bringing you the latest reactions to the story, the latest reactions to the retaliatory attacks. As we speak, developing stories are unfolding across the world in relation to the tensions between Iran and the United States. We heard from President Donald Trump earlier. We're going to discuss that, and let's not forget Iraq. We're going to discuss Iraq, where hundreds of thousands of people have once again taken to the streets for the burial ceremony of the deputy leader of Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, who was also assassinated with General Soleimani in the same attack by the United States. Iraq's PMUs vowing to avenge the killing of their leader with the same level of force, if not more, against the United States as Iran had used. We're going to get expert analysis, and where better to start than with Rodney, Shakespeare, or the author and commentator out of London, and Saeb, Shaath, author and Middle East affairs expert. Gentlemen, let's get straight to it. Mr. Shakespeare, I want to start with you and get your reaction to this, to Donald Trump's remarks, where one of his statements, he made a number of, during his brief speech, he made a number of points, and one of them was that we eliminated the world's top terrorist. Now, the question I'd like to pose to you is, firstly, is that not an insult to the 81 million Iranians who revere General Soleimani as a national hero? Secondly, using the term terrorist, given what General Soleimani did in the fight against Daesh and al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria, and who al-Qaeda and Daesh, who repeatedly tried to kill General Soleimani in both countries, does this show the true nature of who is backing these groups in Iraq and Syria, who had backed them and who fought against them?
Firstly, Trump's remark actually shows the Zionist control of Western media. All the time, Trump makes his remarks and he's appealing to a relatively limited political base, all of whom only watch a limited range of media, which is Zionist controls. And when he does that, he can say any lie that he likes. Let us take the big lie on this question of alleging terrorism and Iran. First of all, as regards killing of innocent people, the United States has killed more millions than everybody else put together since 1945. It has 800 bases around the world. It's involved at any one time, the United States is involved in a war somewhere in the world. You then look at the recent dislocations and killings and mass killings in West Asia. And what you see there is most of it, actually all of it, comes from what we call Daesh and ISIL. In simple terms, the throat slitters and the head choppers. These forces were created with the object of fulfilling American desires in West Asia. The Americans armed them, financed them, and trained them. In alliance with Saudi Arabia, which finances them, finance and finances them, present tense. Saudi Arabia provides the Wahhabism, which is the extremist ideology, which says that there is a reason. I don't know what it is, but it's just a reason for which we can kill anybody, including other Muslims. And with America and Saudi Arabia behind this monstrous blot of on civilization called Daesh and ISIS, doing all the killing and the disruption, is Israel every single time. Those two groupings are linked in really three things really. Firstly, they're out to suppress any form of democracy in the Middle East. Iran is a big democracy in the West Asia, in Middle East, West Asia. Secondly, they are out, if they can, to disrupt, so as to stop any opposition to the expansion of Zionist Israel. And thirdly, those three countries, and it's a sort of another way of looking at it, are linked in the support of the most crude, barbaric, outdated regimes in history, of which Saudi Arabia is perhaps the biggest. They crucify people. They are electroshocks, chopping their heads off, but they crucify people. I mean, how barbaric. And America supports them, and Israel. The linking between Israel and Saudi Arabia is now openly admitted. And my country supports them. Is there no decency in the world that we can't stand up and say we hate the regime of Saudi Arabia? It's an organized oppression of women, for a start, and it's the organized oppression of any form of political expression. Putting this together, you have America with its allies. I mean, who's the other one doing all the killing? That's Saudi Arabia has killed 100,000 in Yemen recently, and perhaps 400,000 had their legs blown off or been blinded. Israel is at assassinations all the time. A quick one there. Who has always asked for the assassination of Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani and of Ayatollah Khamenei, Israel? Now get that straight. He's always asked for it, and since the United States foreign policy for certain is completely controlled by Israel, Trump then carried out the assassination. And then, using the Zionist control of the media, Trump dares to put out the lie on the big scale that Americans don't kill and Iran does. It's outrageous. And you must remember what Goebbels said. Goebbels was the propagandist person for Hitler. And he said that when you tell a lie, just make sure it's a big one. Well, I have to say now that Trump has all the attributes of a fascist. He's arrogant, he's bully, he's racialist, he says, I am for peace and goes to war, and he tells lies all the time. 9/11 is one big organized lie, we won't go into that now, but he's standing up and saying that Iran is the terrorist state. Iran has been the subject of Western aggression since the year dot. I mean, you go back to 1953, Mossadegh, democracy, my country and the Americans overthrew. You go back to 1979, and the West attacked, helping Saddam Hussein do it, giving him the poison gas. I think 100,000 people died on the FAW, Peninsula. And then attack. They're at it all the time, because Iran stands for opposition to the unending expansion of Israel. And its bigger crime, quote, crime, in the eyes of America is simply that it's independent. Any country which stands for just its own integrity, its cultural independence and its political independence, is going to be ultimately going to be attacked. And don't forget that after 9/11, General Wesley Clark says the Pentagon was committed to destroying.
Right.
Was it six countries? I don't know, seven. You'll have to count for me. But you've Sudan, I think, was one. Somalia, but certainly Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, and virtually the only one left at Lebanon, and the only one left standing from American intervention is in fact Iran. So the great aggressor in this world, with its 800 military bases and its control of the Western media, is Iran. They'll tell lie after lie. And the ones that really did the fighting, who did the fighting against Daesh and ISIL, the actual fighting? Well, it's a mixture of popular mobilization units and with Iranian help. And the one who stands for Iranian culture, Iranian independence, and Iranian effective resistance to Daesh, Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani. So I'm afraid that Trump, he's disgusting, man, absolutely disgusting. Quite how any woman could really ever like Trump, deep down, whether they could ever like Trump, I really do have my doubts. There are some women who like bullies and like murderers, cock people like Trump. But my feeling is that women throughout the world are they sense, they can tell what's in the man. And I think they will be absolutely disgusted. So all I'm going to stop there and say, how dare he tell a lie? But then he's learned from Goebbels. And Trump is now effectively the biggest Nazi in the world.
Saeb Shaath, the author and Middle East, an expert on Middle East affairs, also joins us out of Belfast. Now, Mr. Shaath, I don't know if you heard all of what Mr. Rodney Shakespeare's remarks. He raised some interesting points. Again, I have to address the question to you because it's a very important question. The labeling of Donald Trump as, let me just get the exact quote for you, just so we don't make any mistakes about this. He used the term, we eliminated, quote, Trump, quote, we eliminated the world's top terrorist. If I can get your reaction to that, and just touching on what Rodney Shakespeare says, you know, about America's ties with Saudi Arabia, which many experts say is the fountainhead of this Takfiri ideology that inspires, you know, terrorists such as, or inspires people, young men and women for that matter, to join ranks with terror groups such as Daesh, such as Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, the group that America alleges took down, you know, was responsible for 9/11, and yet we see Saudi Arabia being, on one hand, the fountainhead of this ideology, and on the other hand, the US biggest ally. And does it surprise you that Saudi Arabia, the biggest foreign embassy in the United States in Washington DC, is Saudi Arabia?
Yes, exactly. I agree with you, and don't forget the pictures of Prince or Sultan used to be the Saudi ambassador in Washington, when he used to sit at the army chair beside George Bush and telling him what to do. That's how, that is before the September the 11th, and how they were entangled in all of the planning together. And you're right when you pinpoint to the point, which is a lot of commentators forget to mention. Daesh, all of these terror outfit, which is labeled by the United Nations Security Council as terrorist groups, have Wahhabism as a theology for them. And himself, bin Salman, in an interview, I think, with an American magazine, forgot the exact name of I think the Atlantic, when he was in the United States of America. He said to that magazine, they were doing what the American foreign policy demanded out of them when creating groups. He was mentioning about these terror groups from the time, he said, of the occupation of the Soviet Union to Afghanistan to all that. We remember very well these groups from the 1975, led by some figure, a Wahhabi figure, the godfather of Al-Qaeda and the godfather of Osama bin Laden, called Abdullah Azzam. He's from Jordan, and he created all of these outfits and this ideology and start lowering these Takfiri groups in Afghanistan so they can bring trouble to Afghanistan with the help of the Pakistani intelligence, army intelligence services of the time, ordered by the CIA, so they can lower the Soviet Union and the Americans and inflict on them what fresh defeat they had in Afghanistan that time. Remember at that time, the Americans were freshly defeated in Afghanistan, and they want to inflict that in the Soviet because they blame the Soviet for that defeat, not the Vietnamese inflicted on it, liberated their land. So this is the background, and they admitted they were proud of the role of Saudi Arabia, brainwash Muslim youngsters around the world and lowering them to Afghanistan, and the new puppet of the United States of America and Israel at the time, Sadat of Egypt, opened the arsenal of the Egyptian Soviet weaponry and given it to these terrorists. And a lot of stories in here. We don't want to go into too much of details, but it's there for a lot of people to find out. The main thing which I want to put in here, these outfit groups which spread terror in the region, and we seen what the Daesh used to do to the people when they occupied 2/3 of Iraq roughly, with destroying people, killing people, massacring people. And we saw as well what they did with the Nusra and with Daesh before they split even together to the Syrian people. And we saw the Israelis open makeshift hospitals at the border to help the Daesh and al-Nusra guys to be treated and send them back up and send them back to fight. So the links is very obvious. Netanyahu himself used to visit them in the hospitals at the border in support. And we remember all the Western media at the time, from the times of Cameron when he was the Prime Minister of Britain, encouraging people against the regime of Syria at the time, they saying al-Assad. And the people who heeded the message, then the British jailed them, or you were a terrorist, and stuff like the story is all there to see. And when the United States of America even denied Iraq from having one fighter jet, won't sell them one fighter jet to defend the territory against the terror inflicted on them from the north of Iraq, coming to take the whole region and the whole of Iraq as well. The mobilization units start to be created. Late General Soleimani, Qasim Soleimani, start training them, arming them, and showing them the ways and the tactics how to counter these terror organizations in a symmetric way and warfare. The same when they done to the Lebanese resistance, to strengthen them and to give them all the technology Iran had at their hands to fight occupation. And they rebuilt the country and pushed out the Israelis in 2006. The same thing from 2005 till today in the Palestine, the Gaza Strip. The Palestinians, from 2005, they were able to kick the Sharon forces, the occupation forces of Gaza. Okay, they besieged the Gaza Strip after that. But the Palestinians become strong and tougher with the help and the you ask any Palestinian faction, take it from socialist, nationalist, pan-Arabist to Islamic Hamas or Islamic Jihad, they will tell you Iran and by name, General Soleimani was behind supporting us and training and providing us. Late Arafat, he will tell you himself how Iran stood by him, by Arafat, the leader of the Palestinian revolution at the time, and give him all the weaponry they need in the second intifada and before that. This line is there. And so this is part, and when they see in the United States of America and Israel, they're going to lose their outfits, the terror outfits which they created from the 70s up till today and invested a lot of money. As Hillary Clinton said in her famous video, it's an asset, an investment for them, which they used to call them the heroes, Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and today suddenly there's something else. So Trump didn't want to see the end of these outfits. He wants to use them somewhere. He wants to use them in Libya. He wants to use them anywhere. He wants to deploy them to different countries to stabilize the region to keep in control. But there is another point which we have to focus on. The Prime Minister of Iraq stated very clearly that General Soleimani was in an official visit, coming to visit the country, to hand him a letter of reply to a peace deal to be brokered between the Saudis and the Yemenis. This is the mission was Soleimani on. He was trying to broker a peace between Saudis and Yemen. And the Saudis, I'm sure they told the United States of America, because the Saudis, as much as they are pushed, at the end of the day, they are puppets of the United States of America. The Saudis is exactly like the Zionist regime, part of this kind of foundation. So they will do as they told. And then I think the Saudis themselves give a lot of information as well to the Americans. Maybe they just tricked General Soleimani with this kind of deal of breaker in peace. The man was himself, as you can see, the massive crowd which they were bidding for well for him in the Arabic region and in Islamic Ummah, even from Ottawa in Canada to south of Yemen. Millions of people board in the streets. If you look just in the tents of Gaza, receiving the condolences of Soleimani, Qasem Soleimani, until in Iraq, and you go to every city and town in Iran and see the millions and the love poured from all sides of society in Iran. In Iran, you see the Persian, the Arabs, the Kurds, the Balustani, everyone was in there in the streets, united in the love and respect to this general. Why is that? That shows you, and this is a mandate by the people, that was their hero, and they respected him and they loved him. And then they come to us, the United States of America's president today, with 2 generals behind him to support of what he said, accusing him of terror. This is pathetic, and this is the shame on the one even listened to this and didn't criticize him straight away and stop him.
Mr. Shakespeare, I just want to stay with the latest developments and the accusations that are being thrown around. Let's go to the UK, more closer to home, to where you are. During a Parliament session today, I believe it was the opening session of Parliament, the first session of Parliament, the British Prime Minister has alleged that General Soleimani, and I quote again, had the blood of British troops on his hands. Let's dissect this if we can. Firstly, the UK, we know, sent its troops to Iraq on a pack of lies. Secondly, how much blood does the British and American forces have of Iraqis on their hands? And help us understand this point. When the British, what exactly is the British Prime Minister referring to? We know General Soleimani has the blood. Again, we have to repeat this because it's very important to emphasize. General Soleimani has the blood of Daesh terrorists and the Al-Qaeda wing in Syria, the Nusra Front on his hand. These terrorist groups, he should be awarded with a medal, shouldn't he, for that, for keeping Britain and the rest of Europe safe from these terror groups expanding and from terror attacks occurring on British soil and European soil?
Well, I'm sorry to say, Boris Johnson also relies on the control of the Western media, including the UK media, including the BBC, and their control is very often done by omission, leaving things out. And when they do appear to do something reasonably fairly, they always put one little adjective or something which alters the whole impression of the article. Now look, if you just take Iraq, you take 500,000 children were killed by the result of sanctions. I mean, sanctions are no joke, they're war. And that was prior to 2003. And then you have, was it 1 million or 2 million in 2003, in which we were involved. And then you have Daesh and ISIL sweeping through the country, burning people, putting them in cages and setting them alight. The things they've done to the women. And Trump and his puppet, Boris Johnson. Why is Johnson particularly doing this? Because you see, with Brexit now, the UK has got to crawl to Trump. And that is the reality. So these lies, or these monstrous lies on a huge scale, are being parroted both by Trump and by Boris Johnson. And they are both Nazi propagandists. Because behind this, there is also a racialism. That attack by Trump, going to get rid of all the cultural identities, etc. Behind there is a racialism and a cultural superiority, and people like Boris Johnson, my Prime Minister, they're exactly the same. They have no integrity. We have to remember that the atomic agreement was the best piece of diplomacy that has been in my lifetime. And yet, Trump, at the behest of Israel, Brexit, and my country, leaders, a craven, spineless, pusillanimous lot, are now crawling to Trump because of Brexit. They really don't have any alternative. But that agreement now is going down the tubes. Europe has shown it has no integrity, no sense of decency, and instead of standing up to Trump did this because the Europeans, including my country, were supine. They realized that Trump could get away with it and do it. Okay, I'll stop there for the moment, but there's much more to say, particularly about the missiles and things.
No, yeah, Mr. Saeb, if I can get just to finish this off on the British Prime Minister who's throwing these allegations around in the air without any evidence, when he says that the General Soleimani, when he alleges that he has the blood of British troops on his hands, that was his quote. Was it not the Iraqis that fought the US invasion? Was it not the Iraqis that rose up against the US invasion? No country likes to be occupied at the end of the day. When you see British and American troops walking on your streets, walking among your people in uniform with semi-automatic weapons and automatic weapons and machinery and tanks on the streets. No one likes to be occupied at the end of the day. The Iraqis rose up. What link has it got to do with General Soleimani? Why don't they ever provide us any evidence for that?
Why they don't provide the truth of what Tony Blair said at the time, that the Iraqis have weapons, rockets can reach London in 45 minutes. He lied to them at the British Parliament, and when he dragged the country to war, illegal war, on fabricated lies led by the Americans. He knew himself he was fabricating these lies, and he knew himself at the time what he getting himself into, Tony Blair. So not to forget all of that, all the lies, and the British knew about that, and he's free to wreak havoc even in the internal plotting against Jeremy Corbyn, to making sure he will lose, helping and accusing him of being anti-Semitic, and helping a man who stood for peace of being weak, cannot push the nuclear button, and. So we're dealing with monsters like Tony Blair, who have, as Mr. Shakespeare mentioned, have 2.5 million lives on his hand as well, and the Americans' hand. So this is part of the British occupation forces. There is a lot of images, a lot of things on the internet. They can see the Iraqis, but when they were used to arrest Iraqis, they used to pee on them, the British soldiers, in the barracks in Basra. A lot of the stories of rape, a lot of the stories of torture and killing. Forget what the Americans did in Abu Ghraib jail. And so the Iraqis stood and rose and kicked them out. And now they want to blame Mr. General Soleimani of having blood on his hands. The blood of the British soldiers on Tony Blair's hands. This is the establishment who lied to the people and who dragged the country in a war against innocent civilians in there, and wrecked their country and bombed it and pushed it back to the Stone Ages, as George Bush promised to do, and they did. And today they come to us with this. The British, this Boris, he's as Mr. Shakespeare said, he's a liar. He lied during the election. He insulted the Muslim community in here, describing Muslim women wearing hijab as letterbox, and he's even wouldn't look at disabled or sick people in the streets. Or I mean, this man is from an aristocrat who hate even the poor or in his own country, or even the middle class. He just wants to make sure the rich stay in control of this country. And what he's doing today by being the stooge for the United States of America, as was an issue during the British election, the National Health Service, it's being negotiated between his own government and the Trump administration. They want to take it over, the Trump administration. So the British cannot just buy generic medicines cheap. They want to buy the American citizens from their pharmaceuticals, which is hundreds of times more expensive. So he wants to put the country, the British economy, and the British, a lot of health service, maybe education, all of that, at the mercy of the multinationals, American multinationals. And he, because when he, at the end of this month, leave the EU, he wants to renegotiate a new agreement of a free trade with the European Union, and is already was talking from 2 years back with the Americans about securing a favorable trade deal with the United States of America. And so he is paying his dues to them. Whatever you want, they will do. But saying that, in general, if it's Boris or anybody else in the British, ruling the British government, since the Second World War and since the Marshall Plan of rescuing the economies of West Europe, rebuilding West Europe, the United States de facto occupation of West Europe. So most of these countries, they have the state policy is linked to the United States of America. Whatever the United States of America wants, they will do. They will pass it to the parliament. They don't pass it to the parliament. Then strategically, the United States of America in control of a lot of assets and policies within the UK. So Boris, at the end of the day, he's going along this way, but and further, showing more support because he wants the United States of America to help him and to rescue him after implementing the Brexit.